Is that picture of the channel between Big Stone and Laurel Lake? Does anybody know?
No, no.
Mm-mm.
Because that looks like that could be our point. I recognize those falling trees.
I don't know who's talking, but that picture is taken on Woodbury Lake.
On Woodbury Lake. Okay. Thank you very much. This is Nell Meyer Wegman, and we have a piece of shoreline that looks very much like that. So thank you.
Yeah, we're just gonna give some space to people to join the meeting, and then we'll go over a couple and how to use the tools of Zoom.
Okay.
And by the time then but as we start with the introductions, we'll mute the people who are not presenting.
Okay.
And I guess this could have been a little guessing game. Where is the spot?
Hello, Fred.
I recognize the voice. Is that Gary?
Yeah,
All
Did you
right.
see me?
Hey, hi, how are you?
good. When does the spring edition come out?
Probably about the week or week and a half before Memorial Day.
Okay, I was just wondering, I'm writing my article now.
Yeah, Lynn, like, she would have appreciated it by the end of February, but if you can get it to her this coming week, that'd be great.
Okay,
All right, come on. They can hear us, so come on. Come on. All right, come on.
Okay, we're just gonna give a couple more minutes for people to join us.
Yeah. Hey, Lynn.
Good morning, Fred. And others.
Did you hear Gary talk just a minute ago? Gary White was saying that he's writing his article now and he hopefully get it to you next week.
Oh, well, thank you.
I didn't realize it was supposed to be in by, I said spring, and I
Yeah.
thought, well, maybe that would be like April or something that
And I'm sorry, Jerry, because I didn't contact you at all, because I am looking at our newsletter maybe a little bit longer than we thought, and I wasn't sure as far as spacing goes, so I apologize. But if you still want to get an article in, I'll try to do that.
mine would also fit for the summer, that
Well,
because
yeah, it definitely would. So, okay, I
do we wanna-
apologize.
if that's what you want to do, I can do that, because we're talking more, because we don't really see the milfoil until later on,
Well, the newsletter will go out the third week of May.
Okay,
So And if you can get an article in next week, I can see how it'll fit. I can't promise you that we'll have room for it, but because we,
Because
But yet-
I'll keep it short.
okay,
I'll keep it real short, Lynn.
perfect.
Yeah, just
Thank
like me.
Oh, you, yes, oh, geez.
You know, sometimes, I don't want it to be a dissertation.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I would like to welcome you to this workshop. I think we have a good crowd now. There's still going to be people coming and going probably throughout the workshop. But I'd like to start out with it, asking you to please mute yourself now as we'll start with the presentations. And I'd first like to go over the a couple of the tools that we have here to use with this format of Zoom. And thinking that some may or may not know the use of the chat function. On the bottom of your screen, if you move your mouse, you'll see some of the Zoom tools come up, and one says chat. And as you open that, you have the option to type to either everyone or to specific people only, and that will be private. We would like to encourage the chat function for you to post questions through our respective presentations. And as our presenters talk, and the very end of their respective presentation time will be some time where we will feed them questions relevant to their presentation. And then in the very end, after all of the presenters, we will have another time slot for question and answers. So at that point in the end, we may also be able to take some verbal questions, as I understand, especially if people are logged in through devices like a cell phone, they may not be able to access or use the chat function in the same way. We are recording this meeting, as it will be used to be posted on the Three Lakes Waterfront Association webpage, and possibly also the Oneida County Land and Water Conservation Department webpage for people to gain further information. And I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Bärbel Erik. Me and Michelle Sadauskas from Oneida County Land and Water Conservation Department will be moderating this meeting. And then we have a variety of other speakers. And I'm assuming that everybody knows Fred Knock. He's the president of the Three Lakes Waterfront Association in the third term of office, and a full-time resident on the Three Lakes chain, and he resides and owns lakeshore property on Long Lake. Him and Cece Kiefer will be our first presenters here. Cece is the Lakeshore Restoration Coordinator for Three Lakes Waterfront Association, and she's owned lakeshore property since 1991 on Big Fork Lake, and was involved with the volunteer program Adopt a Shoreline for 6 years. And when Cece discovered yellow iris on the lake, that's when it set in that something needs to change. And so I'd like to pass it over to Fred and Cece to share your screen and your own presentations. Again, if you have questions you want to post, please post them on the chat function.
Okay, thanks, Bärbel. I'm Fred Knock, and all of you can see the logo of the Three Lakes Waterfront Association behind me, courtesy of Bruce Rehnquist, who is attending here also. And thank you, Bruce, for the beautiful, beautiful logo. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Fred Knock. I'm the current president of the Three Lakes Waterfront Association. As Bear Bell said, this is my third term. And a little bit about the Three Lakes Waterfront Association. We're a fairly large organization. We have 850 active members and about 350 members whose membership has lapsed by 1 year or so. So our total database is about 1,200. Out of those 1,200 people, we represent a little bit less than half of all the riparian shoreline on the Three Lakes chain of lakes. So it's a big organization. We've been in organization since 1967. And the thrust of our organization in the past has been to study all the lakes of the Three Lakes chain, and we count 20 of those as lakes on the Three Lakes chain. This has been done by Onterra LLC, a professional limnology group, and we have studied all 20 lakes with all of the characteristics of lake aquatic, shoreline, terrestrial, lakeshore, water chemistry data. And we've gone through all of those 20 lakes, and now Onterra is proceeding for its second round to study the lakes again. So this will give us 10-year data points on each lake of the Three Lakes chain of lakes. It's a massive undertaking. The first 10 years of study were published in a publication which was 750 pages long. Each of those individual lakes are included in lake management plans, etc. So a big emphasis, therefore, initially for our organization was to study the lakes. In studying the lakes, we of course encountered aquatic invasive species, and I would say that a majority of our activity in the recent past has been attempting to control or remediate various aquatic invasive species on the lakes, of which we have Eurasian water milfoil, pale yellow iris, and purple loosestrife. Going forward, we'd like to change the emphasis of the organization from remediation and aquatic invasive species management to restoration of the shoreline habitat. And hence we have embarked on a couple of programs for restoration, the first of which was fish sticks. So far in 2 winter seasons, we've placed 5 fish sticks on the Three Lakes chain of lakes as a matter of both restoring shoreline habitat and of course fisheries. Our second main thrust now, and the reason why we're encouraging this particular workshop, is shoreline restoration. And to the point, we have recruited one of our Waterfront Association members, CC Kiefer, to head up the shoreline restoration program for the Three Lakes Waterfront Association. And I will pass the baton over to her to introduce you to what we're doing on shoreline restoration. So CC, take it away.
Thanks, Fred. I think I'm unmuted there. It's wonderful to see so many people interested in this project. I think the more we are concerned about water quality and how we use the water, it's important for us to look at restoration. With the development that has happened since we've owned our property on the chain, it's very clear that we have a lot of shoreline that is being changed dramatically. And it's important to remember why we all came to the Three Lakes chain, the nature that we came to love and enjoy, and we need to preserve that for the people in the future. So I'm going to share my screen here. Oh. Okay. I'm a rookie at this, so bear with me.
We got it. We can see it.
Oh, perfect. All right. As you can see, these are two different distinct shorelines which have been restored. And it's important to remember that to restore your shoreline is to try to bring it back to what was natural at the time on your property. And so there are going to be very different looks depending on where you're actually located. And one of the goals that we have with the shoreline restoration is to actually maintain your access to the water and your use of the shore and the water, but at the same time, try to create some methods to protect the water and other portions of the shore. So every site is going to be unique and will require a different approach, which you'll hear more of a little bit later in the presentation. To speak specifically about the contest, this was an idea that I had worked on in another organization in the Green Bay area where we did a lawn makeover contest. And so we decided it might be fun to try to do that here, to try to get some interest and education opportunities out to people to see what can actually be done and how to do it and why to do it. And so this was an effort on our part to try to drum up some attention. And I think that the contest is a really exciting opportunity to do that. No, that's not advancing. There we go. As you can see here in this slide, these are both the same property. That this restoration on the right has taken an area that was just totally devoid of any vegetation besides lawn. And I don't have a more recent photo of it to show what all that planting resulted in, but they still maintain access to the lakeshore, but they've created an area of greenery, which will help in the future. I guess this is the view I need to have. There we go. The details of the contest are exciting because some of these restorations can be quite pricey, and so depending on the specific property and the needs of the property, it's possible for the winners of the contest to win up to $5,000 to use for shoreline restoration. Some of that restoration can be quite extensive and require, a lot of heavy equipment and things like that, and others are not quite so elaborate. The second place up to $1,500 and the third place up to $1,000. I want to make a point, though, that there are other funding options for people who possibly aren't selected as a winner, and for people who want to do this on their own and not necessarily do it through our organization. So, at the very least, to be honest, it's possible to just do some work on your own. You don't need other funding to do this. So, on a small scale, lakeshore owners can take advantage of doing small projects on their own. No project to try to restore the shore, if any project to try to restore the shore is going to have a positive impact. What you win when you are selected as a winner, you're going to have some professional on-site consultation. Those visits in part will take place prior to the winners being selected because every applicant will have a visit from Bear Bell and her crew to take a look at the property and determine what the needs are on that property. You'll get a complex plan and design for what is required to restore your property. And then there will be funding for materials and labor to try to support the cost associated with the restoration. This is just a peek at the timeline associated with it. The application deadline is a firm deadline of July 12th. That's important so we have time to finish the site visits that have to be done. And you can see that the site visits will actually start before the application deadline. So that will give time to get them scheduled and coordinate with your schedule for when you're going to be there and can show your property to Bear Bell and her crew. So site visits will start as soon as applications are received. So the sooner you get your application in, the better. The funding for this project is coming from 3 different sources. One of the sources is the Waterfront Association and the Healthy Lakes and Rivers Grant applications. That's another source of funding, and those applications are due November 1st. So that's an idea of when we'll start to source our funding. We should be able to announce the winners mid-October. That's sort of a soft date, just depending on when we have the information necessary to do that. And as you can see, the big important information is when will this installation take place, and that will be in the spring and summer of 2022. So it is a long process. Part of that is related to the grant processes. You can get an application by going online to the Waterfront Association website. That website, if you haven't looked at it recently, has been improved with all the important information on the front of it. And we hope to try to keep that as a very informative website for other shoreland resources for you. You can also pick up actual paper applications at the Three Lakes Library and at the Chamber of Commerce. Or as another option, you can reach out to me, and that's my email that's listed there. And just really important to remember, the applications must be in our hands by July 12th. And I wanted to just put in a plug for doing a little research on your own. You're going to get a lot of information today, but to back that up, there's just a whole host of information out there on the internet about restoration. Wisconsin has a pretty good source of information. Minnesota has an excellent source of information. So that's something that is a good place to go. The book that you see there on the left is a book that I actually picked up. I'm not sure it's even still in print, but it says there on the title, Lakescaping for Wildlife and Water Quality, and that is done by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. And I did drop it off at the Denver Library. So there's an information kiosk there. The Waterfront Association has information in there, and that book should be available to you there. And it's got a lot of information in it, and I thought that might be helpful for people. And that concludes my part of the presentation. If Maribel, you take over?
Sure. Do you want to stop your screen?
There.
All right. Well, there haven't been any questions directly coming about the photo contest. So if anybody has questions and is typing them now, this would be a good time. Or otherwise, we can address them after more presentations are coming. But maybe that's maybe that's indicating that you have been just totally to the point.
Well, there is a question that has been directed just to me from Scott, and he asks, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm going to read it to you. He had a site visit last year with suggested changes provided. I'm assuming that was through you, Maribel, I'm not sure. And he says to participate this year, does he require another site visit, or will last year's suffice?
I see. And that's who?
His name is Scott. He did a direct message to me. It's got to
yeah.
be.
Okay. Okay. I would like to encourage. I'm gotten a message now too that these might be questions that would actually be helpful for everybody to read, because you know, but if you send your questions to everyone, people see what other people are asking, and it can actually inspire more questions, or they don't feel a need to write the same question because somebody already did. So I would like to say that this contest, the shoreline contest, is somewhat independent from any, you know, from any of the programs that we're going to be talking about, which is the Oneida County Cost Share and the Healthy Lakes and Rivers programs, while properties who are signing up for this contest will also be assessed for if additional funding could be applied for, and if they would be qualifying for those other programs. It could be entirely possible that somebody would win this contest and not be qualifying for another funding source or being independently chosen. So in reference to that, a site visit would be necessary even if we were out there last year, because the property could have theoretically could be totally different. That is my answer to that. Then we have one question about the what are the requirements to apply for the contest? Do you want to go over that, Cece or Fred?
Yeah, I think the major
Sure. Yeah.
the major requirement to
ahead.
apply is you need to be on the Three Lakes chain. And Fred, you can maybe address that a little more clearly.
Sure. We've made the requirements to be on the Three Lakes chain on lakes that can be connected by navigable waters. The reason for that is we want these restoration projects to be visible to boaters going down the chain. So when we arrive at a project site, we'll put signage up identifying the properties from the water, so people can take their boats by the property and actually see the restoration going on. And for that reason, we've decided to limit the winners of the contest to those riparian owners who are on lakes where you can take your boat by. So for instance, Thunder Lake, Lake Julia cannot be accessed from the chain. Whitefish Lake and Virgin Lake also can't be easily accessed from the chain, but they are lakes of the Three Lakes chain. So that's the reason for our one restriction. Anyone can apply. Other than that, I mean, anyone can apply, and the winners will be based on the needs of the property. In other words, the greatest need for restoration would be the one that we would most likely pick as first place. So I hope that answers the question. Someone wrote, Linda Bogdala wrote, what are fish sticks? Fish sticks are trees that are placed in the water, extending from the land, from the shoreline, out into the shallows of the water. And fish sticks are normally deciduous trees because of their branching structures, and not pines. Usually 3 trees are placed in a fan type of arrangement with the branching structures out towards the lake, and the base of them on the shoreline, anchored by a cable to some anchor on the shoreline, usually another standing tree or something like that. The purpose is to enhance the littoral habitat, and especially for fisheries. So that's what fish sticks are. And fish sticks is one of the grants that you can apply for from the DNR, but the Waterfront Association has an arrangement with the Three Lakes Fish and Wildlife Improvement Association. The Waterfront Association supplies the volunteer riparian owners whose land is going to be used to place the fish sticks, and then the Fish and Wildlife Improvement Organization supplies the manpower and the machinery in order to do it. So the cost to the riparian owner is 0 in this case, and we don't have to apply for grants, so it goes pretty well.
Couple of other
Okay,
things.
then we have another question in reference to whether any funds are contributed from the TLWA to the contest. And Cece, do you just want to give another quick rundown or answer in the chat what the funds are, and then we'll move on to the next presentation.
Sure, I'm going to make one additional comment in terms of who is eligible, because there's a couple other important things. On the application, it says the area to be restored must be impacted by traditional lawn, removal of natural vegetation, or by construction, or the property must have runoff or erosion issues along the shore. And we need to have a minimum of about 50 feet of shoreline to consider for the full-scale restoration. That doesn't mean you can't do a smaller scale restoration than that, but for the purposes of our contest and having it be a big redo and something very visible, we were looking for a minimum of 50 feet. So that's that. Yeah, I think the funding is coming from the 3 different sources, and a portion of that is coming from the Waterfront Association and the Healthy Lakes and Rivers grants and the Oneida Land and Water cost share, I believe it is, Bearbell, correct?
Yeah, it's called County Cost Share Program.
Yeah, so 3 sources of funding. So the Three Lakes Waterfront Association is a 1/3 partner to the entire project. So the exact funding amounts will vary depending on the grants and the job needed.
Okay, then we'll move on. I'm gonna share my screen. Has it come on? Okay, so first of all, thank you, Cece and Fred. This was a really good overview, and I want to say that it's a really inspiring project, and there's some other lake associations on this call, and I'm sure others are gonna watch the recording. So this might be a nice inspiration to go beyond the Three Lakes chain. Well, one thing that's obviously coming up is why is there even an interest in this? What are reasons and benefits for lakeshore restoration? What's the purpose? And that's what I'm gonna take us through. I'd like to just start it out that, you know, shorelines have a very special and important role in our ecosystem. They function as a transition zone between the medium land and water, which allows for a very high biodiversity. And that area has an important filter and buffer function for our water body. So here are some species that like to live on land and in the water that we've all seen up here. Maybe only some of us have seen the hodak, but he's here. And there's many more species. This is just an example to hit home who likes to live on land and water besides us. So what is the background? What's my role in this whole in this meeting, in this project? And I'd like to say that my name Bärbel Erik. I'm working for Oneida County Land and Water Conservation Department as a lakeshore restoration specialist, and I was hired for this project, or specific the project that in my department in this position. As over the years, Oneida County Land and Water Conservation Department has observed that there's a large amount of people who really would like to make a difference and would like to promote healthy shorelines, but they really don't know how to go about it. there's a lot of people who don't know where to start the planning or how to maybe get funding support. And that has led that our department applied for a DNR grant in 2019 in order to create a position that would help lake associations and private homeowners to start the process of restoring their shorelines. So this grant was originally, it was titled A Targeted Approach to Lakeshore Restoration, and we were awarded this grant in 2020. Initially, for the grant application, we had 3 waterfront associations as partners. And at this point, that has extended quite a bit and at least doubled. And we've had many private homeowners addressing us with asking for help and requesting property assessments. So that is my role. I was hired after we received this grant, and previously I worked for the county department as a pollinator coordinator. So I was more focused on restoring and creating habitat on land. So now on land, not at the lakeshore directly necessarily. However, those positions join hand in hand. And initially, yeah, I just want to go over our goals with the grant, and so that you get an idea on what the work really is about besides the photo contest, the shoreline restoration contest. So the goals of the grant were to assess shorelines or collect data from already assessed shorelines, identify the priority areas for shoreline improvement, promote the county cost share and healthy lakes and river programs, and also, of course, install practices onto the landscape. And our grant was initially intended to be 2 years. However, early 2020, as we all know, plans changed a lot, and we are already positive that we will be able to extend the project for another year. So that would be into 2023. So that's just a quick overview on what my role is, and if any of the people here have questions, I will post my email in the chat afterwards. So yeah, back to what are the reasons for restorations. And in general, modern human development has destabilized many of the shoreline ecosystem functions. And as you see in these pictures, none of these areas provide a transition zone. It's a very hard cut edge between water and land. And they don't provide the vegetation with deep root systems. They don't provide the buffer zones. They basically provide clear runoff into the water body. And that's what we're looking at in Dire Straits for some change. Yeah, what are our main goals in any kind of restoration? And that's, of course, to protect the water quality. As you see here, these impervious surfaces provide a perfect slide for runoff to go directly into the water body. And this kind of runoff that you're seeing here is most likely to contain fertilizer, pesticides, oil leakage or salt that's coming off the driveway. It'll have environmental pollutants that are running off the roof and the rainwater, any kind of fecal matter from animals. So there's no filtering of that water happening at all. So our other main goal is to conserve soil resources. Soil has a very important function of filtering water as it's percolating through the soil pores. Besides creating habitat for many small species of all kinds that are important for the decomposition and cleaning of water. We want to prevent erosion because that's how we lose soil. We want to stabilize the shoreline so that it can fulfill its function. And we also would like to promote a natural flood prevention, which is given with the photo down here. That's a very natural shoreline here in the Northwoods. So how do we succeed with meeting our goals? We need to use some supporting actions. And one is building healthy habitat. And here's an example of a hill slope that was just hosting a traditional lawn. And after restoration, it is now a vegetated site with very diverse vegetation that will promote habitat for birds, habitat for insects, especially our pollinators, the bees and butterflies. It'll create habitat for many other species that like to live in the transition zone. The other supporting action is, so one thing about the healthy habitat is that especially native plantings help to stabilize the shorelines because they are the most adapted to take foothold here. They co-evolved with our species here, and they also have a great strength of stabilizing the soil with their deep root systems. So this is where my previous focus of creating and coordinating pollinator habitat is coming in, as you can very easily restore lake shores and actually creating a nice habitat for birds and insects up here. So another supporting action to meet our restoration goals is to filter stormwater and divert runoff. And here you see some examples. This is a rock infiltration pit that will catch the water running off the driveway here and make it percolate through, and therefore it'll be cleaned before it might access the water body. Here is an example of runoff diversion. That kind of bigger rock area here will slow down the flow, which will then be more likely to percolate down, pulled by gravity and the soil pore functions, and then be cleaned throughout there rather than just running off. Here's another example of another little rock infiltration area to slow the flow and make it percolate through the ground. So another really great supporting actions are rain gardens, which essentially function as building habitat and also cleaning stormwater runoff and catching it. So here you see the runoff coming off the roof gutter, and it goes into a rain garden. The rain gardens are typically planted with our native plants, which will provide habitat for butterflies and other insects and birds. So that runoff goes into the rain garden, which will then catch the runoff before it goes anywhere else and make it go down rather than sideways. So we have flow that will be cleaned, and then that water will either percolate into the groundwater or have lateral flow into the water body, but it'll be cleaned. Yeah, so what are the benefits of the restored shorelines? And for us as humans, property owners, obviously you have less maintenance. If you don't need to mow your lawn all the way to the water edge, that's a lot less work. And that's a lot less impact on that shoreline, a lot less compaction of that soil. I'm pointing out the no mow buffer zone. So there's options to have low growing plants that will still provide access for walking or pulling equipment over, or a visual corridor that does not need to be mowed. There's a special low growing no mowing grass mix, or there's actually something that's called bee lawn that's getting really popular, that needs very little maintenance and allows for all the use, while at the same time providing habitat for bees and butterflies. Once you have different kind of vegetation other than a traditional lawn on your property, on your shoreline, it'll become less attractive to geese. Many people complain about geese coming on the shorelines, and that's because it's too open and too easily accessible. The geese are attracted to just getting up on that lawn. So once that's not there, they'll naturally choose somebody else's property or find other areas where they're going to. It actually increases the property value if you have a more naturalized shoreline. So the benefits for nature and humans together, which, you know, we are part of nature, and therefore that needs to be pointed out. If there's less fertilizer and pesticides applied because you have less of a lawn, a traditional lawn that requires that, we'll automatically benefit from a better water quality. That's because those chemicals won't be run off into the water as easily. We'll also have more wildlife. Bees and butterflies and birds really suffer with fertilizers and pesticides applied, so you'll have more variety and life in your yard. That habitat provides space for other species, and the stable soil will help to keep the structure intact. So any kind of wave action coming from borders or the natural sources with the wind will be less affecting your shoreline. So overall, really all we can have is benefits. So I'd like to say thank you and inspire all of us to restore our shorelines. And yeah, I'm happy to take questions now.
Hey, Berbel, this is Michelle. So far, there's nothing on the chat for questions, but sometimes I know it takes a little bit to kind of process and kind of think through what you just saw and what you might have for questions. So if you don't have a question right now, that's all right. We're going to try to open it up for questions at the end of the workshop here today too.
I see one question from a person on Spirit Lake, and he's wondering who to contact for property visits to discuss what needs are to be addressed. And I would say to that person either to contact Bearbell Eric or Michelle Sadowskis at the Oneida County Land and Water Conservation Department. Now, being on Spirit Lake, we would say that you would probably not be able to participate in the contest, at least receiving monies from the Three Lakes Waterfront Association, as Spirit Lake is not on the contiguous 20 lakes of the chain. So I hope that is helpful.
Thanks, Fred. We do have a couple other questions that popped up here, Bearbell. First one here is there a high priority for removing lawns?
Well, I would say I don't want to say a blanket statement here, but if we're looking at a traditional lawn, it's not so much about the removing, but about how close does it get to the lake shore. Basically, a lawn that goes all the way up to the water's edge is not providing the function that the natural ecosystem would. You are destabilizing that area by mowing, and the filter functions just aren't provided there. So a lawn, everybody likes to have open space. So if you want to keep your lawn, that's entirely fine. The restoration aspect here would be to create a strip between the water and the end of your lawn area that would be vegetated with some other plants, and they don't have to be high. There's many options. You can put in trees, shrubs, flowers, or even a different kind of grass that will still stay low, but a type of grass that will have a deeper root structure. The traditional lawns roots reach very minimally into the soil, so they don't stabilize. So if you use a grass that may stay even up to just 6 to 8 inches high, that has traditionally stronger roots and roots that go way further into the soil, you will create a more stable area without compromising your water access or your view. And that way, the traditional lawn would be best to probably have a buffer zone. And please, Michelle, correct me on that footage, but ideally a 30-foot strip. But we also work, with lower footages, 15 feet makes a difference. But ideally, it would be nice to have a 30-foot strip.
I know we also had a,
Something-
oh,
Yeah.
Thank you, Bearbell. We also had a little bit of an extra comment from the person who asked that question, and they had said that they had a natural shoreline, but it is disappearing because of boat waves. And we see a lot of that. And what Bearbell was mentioning with the lawn isn't going to provide you with the best protection of keeping that shoreline intact. Once we go into deeper rooted plants, some of the native grasses, trees, shrubs, those are going to be able to protect the shoreline much better than a grassed area. So that would certainly help, with boat waves there. Okay, and we're happy to take questions and talk more if you want to, email us outside of this workshop or give a call to the office. We're happy to talk through particular, site problems or issues. That's what we're here for. There's a couple more questions here, Bearbell.
Yeah, I think, okay.
Do you want to, I haven't been paying attention to time. How are we doing?
I think it's time that we move into your presentation.
Okay.
And some of these questions that I'm seeing might actually be answered with your presentation. So if you don't feel your questions answered, please post it again afterwards.
Okay, I do want to address this one real quick here because I know Linda had emailed last night. I had received this question about local nurseries that can help with native plants. We do, out of our office, provide a contractor and a nursery list. We do have that up on our web page. I'll mention that a little bit in my presentation as well. And as a county, department, we can't say this particular nursery or this particular nursery, but there's a number of them in the area and outside the area too. We'll try to get you some directions with that. Okay, thank you, Bear Bell.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna share a screen here and we'll get this up and rolling. How's that look, Bear Bell?
I can see a presentation, but not in full screen.
Not in full screen. Okay, are you seeing the next slide or like the notes section, or what are you seeing?
I'm seeing the next slide and the notes section.
Okay, let me just see here. Better?
Yes, this is full screen now.
Okay, all right. Just making sure we got everything looking like it should here. Okay, all right. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. I was excited to have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about our county cost share program. Bear Bell's been doing a great job for our department and for the lake groups that are out there. And I want to kind of hone in a little bit on some of the monies that we have at the county level. Oftentimes it's thought about as larger monies or a bigger pot of monies or for bigger projects, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. So let's see here. Okay, so today what I'll go through is I'll talk a little bit about the Wisconsin Land and Water Departments. I'll hop into the cost sharing. And then I think I'm going to take you on a tour and driving with Miss Michelle here throughout Oneida County and take a look at some of the sites. Okay, 72 counties in Wisconsin. All of them have a land conservation committee and some form of land and water department. Sometimes it's what we have as a title, a land and water conservation department. Sometimes it's land services, but there are 72 departments within the state that work on land and water issues. This might be a little bit too much information for a lot of people, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew that every county, sometimes we have other people, hopping into our presentation here from different counties. So each county does receive what we call cost share monies from the state of Wisconsin. And it's based on, because everybody gets it a little bit differently, different amount. It's based on the 3-year record of spending, the cumulative spending of the cost share funds, what we haven't spent. So if we don't spend it, we're somewhat penalized. And the one thing that we can't compete very much with central and southern Wisconsin is the number of farmland acres. So we don't have a heck of a lot of that in Oneida County. But overall, when we look at those things that the state of Wisconsin is looking at, we do fairly well when it comes to bringing in cost share monies and getting those out to private landowners. So now each year we do get a pot of money from the state, and it is up to the counties how to put that money onto the landscape. So each county could be different. Vilas County would maybe have some different rules and regulations than Oneida County. Some of us have caps, how much can be put out for each project. Some counties rank projects differently. Just imagine up here, we do have an occasional farm or agricultural project, but down in Lincoln County, their cost share monies might be going to a lot more farm-based programs than a lake project. So exactly what is cost sharing? And that's pretty easy. It's the sharing of cost. So it's something that the state through the county is wanting to protect water quality and willing to share costs with the landowner of getting that protection on the landscape. But there's always rules, and maybe rules is not necessarily the correct term here, but there are some program guidelines that we have to kind of stay within. And I just listed a couple of them here, a few I should say, and we are upfront with these, and everybody that is in the program has to be comfortable with this as well. We don't pay more than 50% of the cost of the project. That's just how it pretty much lays out. We do have a cap. Currently it's $8,000 per project. But by chance, if your project isn't that expensive of a project, let's say if you had a $6,000 project, obviously we would be cost sharing, that 50% or the $3,000. The funds are reimbursed after the work is done and after the contractor is paid. This is typical with most grants, to where you go out and you do the work, you spend the money, and then the grant partner goes ahead and pays you back, so reimburses you. And it's actually after sign off. So that is really kind of a neat thing with the county cost share program, is that the oversight is coming from our departments. So we're out there to make sure it's being done to our plan, it's being done right, and it has been done right. And then we work closely with the contractor and the property owner. So it's a partnership by all means. And so the oversight is really something that most people rather enjoy, so they know it's being done correctly. The practices must remain in place for 10 years. And I know practices is kind of a fancy word here, but it could be anything from plantings to some riprap that's installed, something that's put into like a rain garden. That's a practice. So they do have to remain in place for 10 years. And there is a contract and what we call an O&M, which is just a piece of paper saying, yep, we're going to keep that on the landscape for 10 years to the best to our ability. And that's signed between the county and the landowner. And just a little, I think I already mentioned the fact that we do design the plan, and that's a perk with the program as well, that we go in, we do an assessment, we might be surveying the property and designing the plan and getting that out there so contractors can bid on it. And most importantly, and we stress this up and down and sideways, and I know on our website as well, our number one goal going through the program and the cost share funds is that we are out there to protect our water quality, and we want to conserve our soil resources, and we want to do it in a financially responsible way. And I do take that really seriously coming out of our department and out of our office. It is public funds that we've been entrusted with. And we want to make sure that, yes, the homeowner is also getting some, sorry about that, gang. I kind of knew the cat would make an appearance when I was on here. 1 second, sorry about that. So we do look at water quality and conserving those soil resources as our top priority. Okay, so now the next part of the presentation, let's take a ride around Oneida County. I did have this presentation to a different group in early June, but we've kind of updated this because we're in a little bit different spot. Sitting here in February, we've had some work completed, some work that we're in the middle of. So we've got some updated pictures in here. So just in case anybody has seen some of this, it's been updated, so no worries. So let's go. All right, our first stop, we're going to go down to Lake Nokomis. This is near Tomahawk, and I want to show a couple sites at Lake Nokomis. This is a current project that we're working on, and what I want to do here is just to show you a little bit about some of our sites, some of what we might be looking at in projects, and some of the before and after pictures, if I have those here for you to see. This one here is a pretty, you can see there's a failing, what we call, 1 second here, what we call a failing slope. Let's get the cursor in here. You can see where the timbers are starting to cave in. The slope is what we call failing in here. And when we worked up this plan, this one's in the works. The contractor has just started work this February on it. Doing some actually riprap install during to winter time. This is just a quick page I pulled out of our design. It's nothing real fancy, but it's showing here that we're going to be putting in and working on the riprap right in this area to create the base. And we're putting in what we call lifts. I know I'm getting a little technical here, but I can show you a little bit more about this later and see how that goes here. Okay, so the next one is just another page from the design here. And this is just kind of giving notes to the contractor about here's the house, here's the lakeshore, and we're just writing in what we want the contractor to do. And these are the lifts. in here. They're soil filled and they'll actually be planted. Plants will go right in between each of these lifts. So it's helping, we're going to be taking out this wall right here, and it's actually helping stabilize to that shoreline here. A pretty big project, costly wise, and certainly something that fits our cost share program. All right, so let's take a look at another Lake Nokomis site visit that we've had here. This project was already done, so this was a before and after shot that I do have for everyone. This in here, the homeowner, this is a concrete retaining wall that was in here, starting to fail. Oops, sorry about that. Starting to fail, starting to tip down. Lake Nokomis does quite a bit of drainage where they are pulling and letting the water go up and down quite a bit. So there was a time or two that I was out here that the lake water level was well up onto this path, and the rock wall, the concrete wall, was totally submerged. And afterwards, this is what the property looks like, to where we've got the rock riprap that's installed. Notice no more retaining wall. And retaining walls are some of those priority projects that we really like to grab onto, because they're not very environmentally friendly for the wildlife. The shore, the wave action that's coming against the retaining wall. And a lot of times nowadays, most times we're seeing failing retaining walls, meaning they're falling right into the lake or starting to give problems for the landowner. Turtles have a lot easier time, frogs, whatever it may be, have a lot easier time with a rock riprap base such as this. This looks a little rough yet, but this is all plantings in here. This is just shortly after it was completed. So there's a lot of vegetation to come that's in this area. And we didn't do a lot back up in this area because this was pretty moss covered. They had some roots. This is okay. The tree's been cut, and in some time back, but the root system is left to hold this bank. So this bank was pretty good, but there were some plantings that went into this bank as well. So let's take a little drive over to near Rylander. And this is a project that will be going in this summer for us. So I don't have before and after pictures, but I do want to show you another, as we call it, a priority, another failing wall here. And this particular one is a timber retaining wall. So this one here will be taken out. And I'll show you this here. This is just, I grabbed it out of the plan just to get you an idea. This is the other side of the picture that I just showed. We're going to be removing these retaining timbers. We're going to be planting this area, all in this area here. We're going to come in with native plantings. And this wall in the back here, we're going to leave. It really isn't, it is helping right now. It's not falling down. It's been there for some time, but we thought it was something that it was best left in place. All right. So it's not only lakes that we work with. We've started working on more projects with the Wisconsin River. I'm going to show one picture, one site that we've completed and one that we're just starting on. So this is the Wisconsin River here, and I think Bear Bell had this picture up a bit earlier, maybe from the same angle, but this is flowing this way. You've got this curvature, and there's a lot of power, a lot of energy coming into this, taking down the trees. This bank slope, the homeowners are losing this, slowly but surely. They do right in here, and it's really hard to see right here. There is a little bit to where they haven't been mowing, and this is very early spring. So this isn't a summer shot by any means. They have not been totally mowing right down to the edge. But as you can see, this is all grass roots that are helping here. So what the plan is going to be is that we are going to go ahead and put in a lot more native vegetation and create at least a 15-foot buffer of native plants, grasses, trees that are actually going to be providing a much better root system. And then we're also going to have to do some protective work in this bank area here, but we're still working on exactly what that may look like. Okay, now this is a project that has been completed, so I can show you a before and after picture. And this is almost the same scenario. This is a little bit upriver of the project. And if you look here, we've got a curvature coming in, And once again, creating some issues on this bank. The house is just back in here. So the house is not that far back, and they've been losing some bank and trees right in here. So what we did, we came in, and this was a new one for us, a little bit of a different angle here. But what we put in here is what they are called root wads. I'm going to go frontwards to show you what root wad is. So these trees were actually, I think they were at a cut that they were able to source these. So that what they've done is they've chiseled the point, and this section, this root section, has been left intact. These are every bit as big as about 7 feet wide with that root system. Okay, we'll go back here now. And do you see down here? This is the root ball. This is roots. This is roots. And what happened here was a piece of machinery came in and actually pounded that stake into the bank. And the rock has been put around these root rods. And then what this has done, when all this water and energy is coming in, it's not only going to protect the shoreline, but also create habitat. Any of the material that's flowing down from the river is going to get stuck in these root wads and actually start building and creating habitat in here. Now this here is what we call a bag wall. This wasn't in our plan, but the owner did want to protect the slope a little bit more than what they wanted, that we had projected here. And what we've got here is plantings going right in here, and this whole bank will be protected with plantings here. Okay, let's see here. All right, so we're going to drive on over to Pelican Lake, and I think we might have some Pelican Lake participants in here. Let's take a look at this property. So not every call that we get, when we get a call from a property owner, say, come take a look at our property. Can you tell us what needs to be done? Or is there something that needs to be done? Or oh my gosh, we think something bad is happening. And not every property that we go to is something that, oh my gosh, something really needs to happen, or it's going to be part of the cost share program. Sometimes it's pretty simple fixes that need to happen. So if you look here, this is what we call, where this arrow is here, this is what we call an ice push or an ice heave. And that is a natural protective feature here on this particular section of property. So there's a little bit of rock. I mean, that could have been put here some time back, or it might have been some natural there. I'm not sure what the history is there. But as long as we plant this a little bit heavier, we've got some tree roots that are helping out in here. And what our suggestion to the homeowner was to just really plant this as much as you can. They do have some plants in here, but it could take more, maybe putting some shrubs in there that will really help this. The last thing we want to do in this situation is do any construction or mowing down or grading this down. This is a really important feature, protection feature for that lakeshore property area here. All right, so now we're off to Three Lakes, and I believe this is a thoroughfare site, and we had gotten a call on this property, and I think the participant might have, I might be online here. So we had gotten a call to take a look at this property, and we didn't know exactly what the homeowner's concerns was right up front. I mean, there was a little bit of back and forth with conversation, but sometimes it's really good going into a property not knowing what the homeowner is totally focused on or totally concerned about. We're able to kind of look at that property and get a better idea of what we feel is going on. And this is a boggy property. There's a lot of shrub layer right in here. This is very, like I said, like a kind of a boggy-ish floating kind of mat type of thing going on here. But our initial, when we saw this, was this is great. All the shrub layer that's in here, the fern layer, the tree layers, there's roots. This is all able to protect this shoreline. We recommended some more plantings up in this area. This is a little bit compacted in this area, but plantings would help out, or even just a low mow kind of, a no mow kind of grass type, but this really isn't that bad. Overall, the property was in pretty good shape. The one thing we did kind of hone in on here, and just to show everybody, and we see this at a lot of our properties, with a little bit of usage, we're pulling the boat out of this area, and you can kind of see how this shoreline has been lost a little bit in here, where it's kind of making that U-turn in here. And that's just from use and a little bit of, where there isn't plantings to protect that shoreline. So our recommendation here was to try to, if they could put the boat, whether they wanted to moor it here during when they're there, or if they could do something differently and then have this area planted in here. But this is a common thing that we see on a lot of properties. It's just a matter of how do we as humans use our property, interact with the lake, and try to make those adjustments and to make it work for everybody, lake and the development that's on shore. All right, so we're going to go over to just stage remain now, just a quick stop in. And this property is actually in the works right now to being designed and being restored here. This is a before picture right here. You can see this bank is pretty rough, not a lot of vegetation. The homeowners were trying their best that they could do here. This is pretty old from what I was told, but they had put the stakes in, and oftentimes trees would fall down up here, and they would just try to lay them in here just for protection on that shoreline. So this happened a little earlier this year. This was early winter this year. There wasn't a lot of ice on the lake at this time, but this is the initial. We went in with rock riprap. As you can see, this is pretty much, it might be almost the same location. This was the before, and this was an after. And what we had to do here is, this is the base that this is establishing. So this is going to be the first defense here to help protecting this bank and the shoreline. And what's going to happen is these are actually, we're going to have soil filled bags. They're about a couple feet by 1 feet. And they're going to be filled with soil. They're going to be laid in this area to kind of build up these little divots here. And they're actually going to be planted in between the bag layers. And I'll show you that a little bit later as well. And so this project's only partly done right now. But I also wanted to show this. This is actually at the end of the property. The property line sits somewhere over in here. The owner did want to go to the end of the property. And there's sometimes a point where we just want to let Mother Nature take its course. The amount of money and work, and maybe not to the best benefit of the property and the shoreline, is putting rock and putting bags and trying to do more to it. Sometimes you just got to kind of know where you want to let, where does Mother Nature and where do we kind of come in together here. This would take, it would be really difficult to put the rock and to bag it here. The other good thing is when trees fall into the water, it's not always bad, and most times it's good. So when these trees do go, they are actually going to provide a tremendous amount of protection for that bank and that property, just from buffering it from waves and wind action, and also creating habitat. So when these trees do come down, it's actually going to be a win-win for everybody involved. All right, and just a few more sites here. I'll go through these quickly. I don't want to take up too much more time here, but just to show you a little bit more of what we've got going on. And I believe we've got a project that was a before and after picture. So this is a real small lake outside of Minocqua. It's called Diamond Lake. And the homeowner doesn't have a dock at this time. I'm not sure what their plans were putting one in, but they like to kayak and they did access through here. Now, unfortunately, their neighbor was actually accessing the lake via a four-wheeler by permission. And the first thing we always say is when we think about restoration, and the easiest thing to do is stop doing something to help restore the shoreline. So in this case, the first thing, let's stop the four-wheeler access. It shouldn't be happening. It's not good for anybody in this situation. And so that was number one. And even when you're talking about mowing down to a shoreline, oftentimes just stopping the mowing, you'd be amazed at what would come up for native vegetation with that grass not being mowed anymore. So sometimes it's just a matter of not doing something that had been being done before. And this is an after picture. This was just taken last fall. We were just started getting our frost in here. It looks a little bit rough yet. This is going to look quite a bit different if I come next summertime. The contractor put in these kind of coconut core logs that are in here right along the lakeshore. So notice there's no. And this here, if you take a look, this was another perfect example of this was where the shoreline was. Just by use, that particular property owner lost multiple feet of their shoreline just by the use that they were going through here. So we came in and we're protecting this, and this is planted. This right in here, this area here, this is planted and seeded. So this is a little bit of a kind of a, I don't want to call it a plastic mat. It's kind of a shore max or a protective max that gets planted, and actually this will all be vegetated, but it'll have a little bit of where you can have traffic on there and be able to actually access your property without doing more damage, or access the lakeshore, I'm sorry. And this was a little bit further back. A lot of work was done. This house does not have a basement. It has like a type of floating foundation. I'm not into this too much or know too much about this, but this was the before shot and this is the after shot. So we were able to help them with installing 2 rain gardens. This is one rain garden right here. And this is where the downspout was. And there's another rain garden off on this side, which there's a downspout right here that was taking the back half of the roof. So any of the water coming off of that house wasn't just running down into the lake. It's coming into these rain gardens, infiltrating down into the soil. And this was also all planted in a no-mow. So it'll be exciting to kind of see what this project looks like next summer. And just a couple quick slides here. This was a property on Lake Minocqua. Once again, as I said, usage where they were entering with a boat. Maybe they had a dock here too. I do have, this project was completed where we put rep and just kind of follow the contour of the shoreline. And then we planted 6 feet back in here into this grass area. And this is a big project. This was like Kawagasaga. And these are the soil filled bags I was talking about. And these are, do you see these little plants all in here? All these little plants get rooted and are planted in between these layers of bags. And then what will happen is this whole slope gets vegetated. And this is what it looked like before. This is the same tree. This is before and this is after. And there is a little bit of riprap down in here. And with our program here too, you've probably seen fences on some of the slides that we've shown. This is a temporary deer fence because the last thing we want to do is put money into plantings and then have the deer come along and pull them all out the first summer that they're planted. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed our ride. And I just want to lastly just show, this is our webpage. If you go to oclw.org, we do have a cost share program tab and also a projects tab. So you can go in there and take a look at before and after pictures. You can see we have estimated cost or what the projects did cost. We have examples of plans. Take a visit, kind of hop around a little bit. We're happy to talk to you via phone, email, text, whatever it may be. That's what we're here for. We want to help you kind of go through the program and try to learn some things. And it doesn't take having to be in the program. We're also there just to help you with plantings or help you kind of go in a little bit of a direction that maybe you want to do the property or the project yourself. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. That was quite a bit of different impression. That was pretty neat. We have one question. Should we lay landscaping plastic beneath large boulders on the shoreline?
No, that's an easy one. There is a special type of fabric when people are putting, there's a couple things. First off, when I hear about large boulders going into the shoreline, sometimes it sounds like a great protective feature to put that boulder there, but it's fascinating to know and realize what water does, because you could put a boulder or two and then exacerbate the problem that you're seeing of how the wave is bouncing off that rock and being pushed somewhere else. So I just caution just putting boulders and big boulders down at the shoreline. Number two, when we're laying riprap, when we're looking at the riprap, if somebody's coming in, what we want to do is get the correct fabric. It's what they call a geotextile fabric that's behind that riprap. It's a really tough fabric. It's going to stay in place. It's meant to stay in place for years and years. And the biggest thing there is it's preventing the shoreline from being sucked out between the rocks. So imagine the waves coming in and hitting those rocks. If you didn't have that geotextile fabric, or if you had just a cheapy landscape fabric that doesn't like hold up past 1 year, those waves come in, they hit the shore and the soil behind those rocks, and it just sucks it right out. So I just urge caution about putting something down at the shoreline that you think will help. And I've seen it time and time again in visiting sites. Sometimes trying to fix a problem creates a bigger problem that you didn't see coming. So give us a call. We're happy to talk you through things or talking with contractors out there. There's a lot of skilled contractors that are out there as well.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. There's no other questions coming right now, and I would like to pass it on to Pat Gargan, who's here. Pat, are you here?
Morning.
Okay. Let me just. Yeah, Pat Gargan is a lake specialist from UW Extension Lakes, and is a founding member of the Healthy Lakes and Rivers Grants program. So we'll get the first-hand information from him here.
Now I'm just about, there we go. Let's get this out of the way. All right. Just trying to get this out of the way here. There we go. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you well.
Very good. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you here today, and pretty exciting. You guys, I remember joining your annual meeting about 5 years ago and beginning a discussion around healthy lakes and rivers and the opportunities that these best practices provide for helping with clean water and wildlife habitat. And lo and behold, you guys jumped into doing the fish sticks projects that Fred mentioned earlier in the broadcast. And now we're embarking on some shoreline work and some deeper dive into this work. So kudos to you for thinking about how to help with these actions with your water bodies. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Healthy Lakes and Rivers approach and the 5 best practices, not just the native planting, but the fish sticks that was mentioned and some of the other tools that are in the toolbox. I'll spend a little more time going deeper dive into the native planting piece of things, because that is really where the rubber hits the road with your shoreline restoration makeover contest. And really applaud you for taking this on and for using it as a way to get your membership to think about these best practices. I think one of the things to start with is a picture like this, where I call this an intact vegetated lakeshore area. And the values and functions that go with this kind of intact lakeshore are huge, as Barbell was describing earlier. You know, starting out in the water with the wood structure that falls in over time, we can have as much as 500 pieces of these woody logs moving along the shore per linear mile, where we have that recruitment of wood over the centuries. Unfortunately, though, that's been one of the changes to lakes that we as people have done. And we've taken that wood out or not allowed it to fall, and that's taken a lot of the habitat away. Believe it or not, that wood also helps from an erosion control point of view, because as that wave action or ice push makes its way to the shore, the wood helps break that ice up and dissipate that energy over time. The other thing that wood in the water does is it allows vegetation like this emergent vegetation here in the form of hard stem bulrush to have enough capacity to be able to grow. It doesn't churn up the soil as much with that wood in the water, and it allows those plants to get established. That's good news for fish. That's good news for aquatic insects. And that's good news for the cleanliness of the water over time, because that vegetation provides oxygen for fish. It provides cover for the baby fish and roosting spots for those aquatic insects to emerge from, as well as homes for those aquatic insects over time. And that's the food base for the fishery that's important to so many on a chain of lakes like yours. The drifted in logs is also wildlife habitat. This is where you'll find things like water birds using this roosting area to attack and to fish for different critters, for example. Other critters like the aforementioned turtles will use it as a sunning place. All sorts of decomposing critters decompose this wood over time, and that's food for fish and other wildlife as well. And then moving up the shoreland system here, we get to that important land-water interface, and where we have this shoreline vegetation. And it's really a suite of vegetation. It's a canopy layer, a mid-story layer of smaller trees and shrubs, and then a duff and ground layer of wildflowers, sedges, rushes, and a buildup of sticks and leaf material that acts like a sponge. And this vegetation, as that rainfall hits it, soaks that water up. It allows it to make its way down slowly into the duff layer. And again, that duff layer is like a sponge. And instead of that water bringing dirt and pollutants to the lake, it is infiltrated through this vegetation system. So it's really all these features we see here. We can even talk about the cobble. You can see here the cobbly substrate mixed with sand. That's going to be our nesting material for our fish, for example. Well, if we let building get out of hand and the nutrients and dirt get picked up from that dirty stormwater coming off properties, this gets covered with sediment and no longer provides the habitat feature for spawning fish and fish nests and so on. And you see at the bottom here, almost 80 to 90%, not almost, it really is 80 to 90% of the lake life, the critters we see moving in and around our lake and river systems, they're using this land-water interfaced area for their life cycle. But part of the story here and part of the challenge that you guys are addressing here through your shoreline makeover project is we've had a change on our lake ecosystems. I think in our introduction, friend Cece mentioned when we first showed up here in the Three Lakes area, it was probably something like this, right? A 3-season cabin where we had maybe 700, 800 square feet. Mom and dad got to sleep in the cabin, but we probably slept outside on the floor or in a camp or in a tent, right? And so what's happened, and the footprint of this cabin was pretty small in terms of the impact of phosphorus and sediment. That's the dirt running off the property from the impact of this cabin. So here's a diagram trying to capture what's going on this site. We have a maple beech forest with a short slope, not too high. We have a grass corridor. When I say grass, I mean native grass, not lawn down to the edge. We have a small little cottage here that's about 700 square feet and a gravel driveway. Well, these old cabin developments did have as much impact on the lake. They had a little runoff in terms of some of that soil, a small amount of phosphorus, 0.03 pounds of phosphorus. And again, some sediment making its way to the lake because we have changed things a little bit. But on came affluence in our society, and a lot of folks fell in love with lakes all over again, and they changed those cabin structures from 3-season structures to maybe something more like this, a 4,000, 5,000 square foot structure. And what changes on these properties are a couple of things. Now we've cleared that vegetation out along the shore, unfortunately. Look at the face of this hard structure just on the roof alone, facing this lake water, and now rolling that water off, and there's nothing to infiltrate and grab that water anymore in front of this property. On the backside, we probably have a hard top gravel driveway now, as well as probably an outbuilding or two that has a rooftop to it. And so what changes in that development pattern is if we're not paying attention to that runoff, and if we're not paying attention to keeping the vegetation intact along the shoreline, that is what can bring problems. And it's not that just one house did it, it's that all the houses have changed from that cabin to that bigger structure across our lake. So if we looked at one of our 3 lakes chain water bodies, you know, you can think about, all right, initially it probably didn't have too much of an impact because only 1 or 2 houses got bigger. But by this time, all the houses have grown to where they're this larger size. And if we haven't built those properties in such a way that we're dealing with the runoff that comes with these more hard surfaces, this paved driveway, we now have 3,000 to 4,000 square feet of hard top on a home. Look at the jump in runoff to the lake. We have 5 times the amount of runoff now going to the lake. We have 6 times, almost 7 times as much phosphorus off this property. And the sediment as well jumped up to 90 pounds from the previous number. And so if we're not mitigating and working with our properties to get that water to infiltrate, to get that dirt not to make its way to the lake, we have challenges. And indeed, we've seen this in our assessment of lakes over the years. In the last 2 decades, we've done something called the National Lakes Assessment in partnership with the Environmental Protection Agency. And lo and behold, you see the black box up there. The #1 stressor to our water bodies, not just in Wisconsin, but across the country, is the loss of this lakeshore habitat, that interface of vegetation, that wood in the water, those aquatic plants in the nearshore area. That suite of native materials comes together to perform for us clean water and to intercept that sediment. And we've changed that system a little bit. And we've been studying this in Wisconsin well before the environmental impact or the environmental EPA's lake studies. We know that, for example, songbirds change from between undeveloped and developed lakes when we take out that native vegetation. We know that when we take that wood out of the water and change the aquatic habitat in that nearshore area, our fish species change, and or if they don't change, they suffer in terms of the food sources that they're able to utilize. This image over here shows us we're pretty good about leaving the canopy on our shorelines, but that understory and shrub layer I mentioned really have been hammered on some lots across the state. And you see, here's an example of that wood I'm talking about. This is from a lake in Vilas County when the water was down back in the early 2000s. And this is a lake that had natural wood recruitment over the years, and you can see what I'm talking about in terms of that wood piling up over the years. And if we've stopped that wood from making its way into the lake, that's a lot of habitat that now is lost for critters. The good news is we as property owners, and through your initiative here, Shoreline Restoration Contest, we can make a difference. We can look at our properties, hopefully, using maybe a list like this or a checklist you can find on the Healthy Lakes and Rivers website, to just take a look at our whole property in a holistic way. And to think about those 2 big driving things about what's going on in our property. How is water moving around our property? Is it moving safely into the woods where it's infiltrating? Or am I having challenges with it coming off my hard surfaces and making its way down to the lakefront and bringing with it that dirty water and that sediment? And what can I do about changing that formula through intercepting that water through tools that we'll talk about, or changing the habitat in front with that lakeshore buffer being restored and infiltrating that water again. And then the other piece is just that habitat itself, putting that wood and those vegetation layers back on the lakeshore edge. We're creating that wildlife corridor and that habitat that's so important to wildlife. So the graphic I share here is just some examples of the kinds of thought processes we can start thinking through as we look at our property and contemplate what can we do, maybe as a family, taking one step to work towards cleaner water and better wildlife habitat. Indeed, that wildlife habitat we've come to love and came to the lake for in the first place. And so back in 2014, the DNR, in partnership with counties and partners like Extension, who I work for, and really lake communities across the state, like your lake group here, coming together to do good things for lakes in terms of restoration. And again, the goal is to protect and improve the health of Wisconsin lakes and rivers by helping you as shoreline property owners participate in habitat restoration work and controlling that stormwater runoff through erosion control projects and infiltration work. And so again, it's about getting this tree, shrub, and grass layer reestablished if it's been disturbed or changed on the landscape. It's about working on that woody input to the lake over time, and just thinking about our properties in this broad, holistic way. The Healthy Lakes and Rivers grant is part of the Surface Water Grant Program that Michelle and Barbella have worked with quite a bit and know a lot about, and there's other resources in there for shoreline restoration as well. Healthy Lakes sometimes is not right for every project. Michelle talked about the cost share dollars that the counties get. Those sometimes can be utilized for bigger projects that might be beyond the scope of the smaller Healthy Lakes types projects. For instance, construction projects that have slopes greater than 20% are a little too much erosion control and engineering for the Healthy Lakes goals. And so, for example, you might lean on cost share dollars to help with that kind of a project. And so just here's an example of what a project like that could look like. Some serious erosion going on here. I could see the root wad example that Michelle gave earlier, working on a site like this, but it's a little beyond the $1,000 support that Healthy Lakes gives. So just that's part of what the console with working with Michelle and Barbell will give you, is just understanding if what you're hoping to do on your property fits with the cost here. One of the things we did as a Healthy Lakes and Rivers team is create a set of materials to help with the 5 best practices involved with the program. And for each one of the best practices, we have a 1-page fact sheet that takes you through how to build the project, the timeline, whether you need permits, what kind of materials do I need for my project, and so on. And then also accompanying each of those fact sheets is a more in-depth, deeper dive into the technical information you need to know, or an example of fish sticks here, how to connect like you did with your fish sticks, or excuse me, with your fish manager to site those fish sticks complexes correctly, and to work with your fish manager and making sure that you don't put the wood in the wrong place, for example. So we have a companion document for each of the 5 best practices as well. And all this material can be found on the Healthy Lakes and Rivers website, which I'll show you a link to here in a little bit. This image gives you a sense of where we find the 5 best practices that Healthy Lakes and Rivers support, starting in the water with those fish sticks, which basically fish sticks are 3 to 5 large pieces of wood. We're talking 20, 30-foot pieces of trees, freshly cut within the last 6 months, that are then put into a complex of wood on the shore, perpendicular to it, and then tethered in using a duckbill anchor system to an existing tree on shore. Your shoreline restoration contest is the 2nd best practice, the native planting 350 square foot Healthy Lakes and Rivers practice, where we're really helping you try to reestablish those layers of vegetation at that land-water interface and trying to jumpstart that vegetation through the putting plugs back in the ground. And then 3, 4, and 5, you see, are more in the upland part of the property, dealing with that storm water, trying to grab that water off the rooftop, off the driveway, off the outbuilding. And instead of letting it get down to the lake, we're intercepting it in the rain garden. We're putting a speed bump or a water bar on the access road to steer it into the woods. Or we're using a rock infiltration pit to collect that water in and slowly allow it to infiltrate back into the ground. We work with local champions. So you have CC helping here in concert with the Atlanta Water folks. This is just how our team envisioned this working and how it has been working over the last 5 years. It really takes your local community buying into the effort, working in concert with your county and state resources through the grant to pull these kinds of projects together. And we couldn't really do it without you as local champions. Basically, you're going to be working with the Oneida County Land and Water Shop to do those initial site visits and to see where your project falls, if it's suitable for the different kinds of things you want to do, and to see if it's not too big for the Healthy Lakes grant, for example. And one of the things you can be thinking about, hopefully as a team, is coming back next year, as Barbell said earlier, to this grant opportunity, and perhaps there's additional best practices that you fund as you grow into this program. So I'll just go through the 5 practices to give you some visuals of them and to give you some sense of how they hit the landscape out there, as well as working with the materials that I've mentioned on the website to help guide you in this process. So here's an example of the fish sticks going in. Typically this is winter work when the ice is good and strong, and a team of folks using different kinds of equipment. It might be a skid steer, it might be some ATVs, but you see the wood gets brought out onto the water body, and then it's put perpendicular to the shore and anchored into existing tree on the shoreline. Later on, when this ice melts, the vegetation falls into the lake bottom, gets situated into the sand, and becomes the fish sticks complex that supports wildlife in the lake. And here's an example of what that looks like over time. Here's your shoreline restoration contest example. So these are 350 square foot. They have to be at least 10 foot wide to meet the guidelines of the Healthy Lakes and Rivers program. But the idea is you can shape it to fit what your lakeshore needs are and the spacing that you have on your existing shoreline. Michelle mentioned earlier that fencing might be used in some cases where deer pressure is out there or browse from other critters like rabbits. And so fencing might be required. And there's information on the temporary fencing that Michelle described on the Healthy Lakes and Rivers website. So, you know, you can fit these plantings in. It might be a backward L. It might just be a square 18 feet by 19 feet. It might be 10 feet linear and then a few feet back on this side. Again, the idea is that you can shape that planting to fit your property, if you will, with a minimum of 10 feet wide. We suggest staying away from high foot traffic areas or your septic, and to look for areas where maybe are prone to erosion, like bare ground or slumped areas where that vegetation being added is going to help protect those spots into the future. We're working at this land-water interface. That can be a little tricky in terms of the species we use. We can go from wet feet to dry feet pretty quick here in the sandy country of Oneida County. And so one of the things you'll see in the list of plants that we're going to go through here in the guidebook for the native planting is we have plant species for medium and dry soils, as well as a separate list for wet species. So the first step is working with the Oneida County Land and Water Shop to understand what your site conditions are in that way. Here's what that fact sheet looks like for the native planting, again, mentioning different aspects of the project. And then I'll go through here the native planting companion guide in a little detail here. That guide has 6 planting options within it. Those are template plantings that are designed for a specific goal you might have in mind for your project. You can find it, you can find the materials at just Google Healthy Lakes and Rivers, Wisconsin, and you can find this website and the companion planting guide. As I say, within the planting guide, you'll see these 6 planting options. We have lakeshore edge, a wet foot situation right at that land-water interface. Michelle talked about the need to support pollinators and migratory birds through these native plantings. Well, the second planting suite of plants, grasses and woody material is there to help support birds and butterflies. Perhaps you have an area where the lawn isn't growing very well and it's shaggy and there's bare soil. That's an example of where you could stabilize the shore using the third planting option. We've also talked about maintaining the view corridor and not getting too high with the vegetation. That's where number 4, the low growing option, comes in. And then 5, deer resistant. Some of us have a challenge with deer coming into our properties and trying to get after our plantings. The suite of plants used in the number 5 option are plants we know over time are a little more resistant to that kind of browse. And then last, number 6, is a scenario where we have a little shade on our property and a different suite of plants that can deal with that situation. In the guide, you will see for each one of these 6 options, a layout of the plants that a graphic designer and lake leader, Karen Engelbretson, did for our team, just to give you a sense of how to lay these plants out in an aesthetically pleasing way in drifts of color and to mix the planting up between the grasses and sedges and the wildflowers and woody material you will be utilizing. Here's an example of a different shape, a bird butterfly garden. Maybe it's more of a round shape that you put in. And here's those species of plants and woody material that help support birds and butterflies. Indeed, the mighty oak tree alone can support over 500 different kinds of pollinators. So that's why you see a white oak in the mix here. Here's the bare soil one. Here's an example of, all right, here's our property line here and our shoreline area here. We're going to sneak this bare soil planting in the corner here and to give us a little more stability on our shoreline edge, for example. Buffers affect birds. We heard the geese scenario. When we put this stiff vegetation up at that land-water interface, we are helping to avoid that geese visiting us because they don't like to go where they can't be in the open and see those predators coming. And so again, you might be thinking about a low growing option to keep that view corridor, but also to mitigate a geese problem, for example. And then here's an example of those deer tolerant plants, things like the giant hyssop that has a minty or a little smell to it, or just other plants that over time haven't do a little better in resisting the browse or the chomping that comes with deer or rabbits. That's not to say that it's deer proof, but we can use sprays, the fencing, and other mechanisms to also abate that challenge. And then last is a shady example in a wet foot scenario. This one is, and just shows you a suite of species that can deal with more of a wet foot situation, as well as the part shade scenario that we might find on some of our shorelines. Here's what that list of species will look like in the guide for you. So you can either choose the dry medium soil situation or the moist wet soil, depending on what your site conditions are. And then the planting options follow the shoreline habitat standard for the state of Wisconsin, in that we have the brown category, woody plants. The green category is the sedges, grasses, and rushes that have these deep root systems that are so important. And then the wildflower and fern component. And we use workhorse species. We try to encourage in the plantings to create mosaics like you see here. So here's one species, here's one species, here's another. And you see how they're laid perpendicular, or excuse me, in these little polygons along the shore here. And the idea is as wave action or ice action hits the shore, you have layers of vegetation all the way up to the shoreline and then into the tree and shrub layer as well, resisting that erosive force over time. This is just some examples of the root structures we're talking about. These are plants that we use that were part of the list that we just showed. Here's marsh milkweed, or the red milkweed. After 1 year of growth, that big root structure getting its way down into the ground. This is one of our native asters. This is one of our native grasses. This is blue joint grass, and you could just see how fibrous that root structure is just in 1 year. And you can imagine as it penetrates the ground, how it's going to help anchor and hold the soil and help with infiltration. Here's two more sweetest plants. The top ones are sedges. So sedges are even more fibrous with these beautiful fibrous root systems. This is fox sedge, stipata, and I'm not sure which one this is. And then just some other wildflowers. Here's blue vervain, ox-eye daisy, and the black-eyed Susan. Here's the plant up here, and look at those root structures going down into the ground. We also know that the woody component I mentioned supports those pollinators in important ways. Here's that oak tree supporting over 557 species of moths and caterpillars. This is really important because the wildflowers in spring aren't out there right away, and the woody material is key for those insects to get going in spring. And why are those insects important? Well, really, they're the base of that food chain for migratory birds, for our breeding birds and other critters as they try to get things going each growing season. When we put these plantings in, you saw the drawings I showed you. We can do it with care. We call them cues to care. We have a little S curve, for example, in this one with a little bit of colorful mulch, and then the planting itself starting. What we're using through the cue to care here is, all right, we move now to the natural area. And this sometimes just makes for a more aesthetically pleasing transition. This picture used edging itself in an S-shaped curve of the black-eyed Susan, grading into the vegetation of grasses and sedges, and then some of our gay feather and blazing star along the shore, and more grasses there at the land-water interface. So we can do these plantings in such a way that keep them visually appealing, but also get the ecological function we're looking for in terms of those root structures, that water infiltration, and providing the wonderful habitat for critters. Here's what those plantings look like after they're put in the ground. So here are our sedges and grasses along the shore, and our different wildflowers in the fall here, New England aster, Joe Pye, and others. We can use the fence system that Michelle showed us, or some of the spray products that are out there, or you could get an Anatolian shepherd if you want. Any of these resources might come into play, but the idea is we have to pay attention to that browse over time, and there might be a maintenance need to spray once in a while. The third best practice is this water bar or diversion. So many of us have access roads coming down to our lake cabin, and these access roads sometimes have a little slope to them such that they might be trying to transport dirty water from the blacktop road down our driveways, picking up the dirt and material and depositing it into the lake and causing the challenges of harmful algal blooms covering that cobble up for the fish and so on. Well, what can we do? Well, we put a little bump in the road here. This could be a wood timber. It could be, in this case, it's a flexible piece of rubber. And then that water comes down the road, hits the bump in the road, and gets slowly diverted into the woods where it can infiltrate into the ground. If you didn't have a woods to send it to, you could put a rock infiltration pit right here into the ground 4 feet, again, to give some voided space for that water to find its way into the ground. Here's what the companion document is for the control, for the diversion and rock infiltration best practice. It's called Controlling Runoff and Erosion on Your Waterfront Property, and you can find it on the Healthy Lakes and Rivers website. It walks you through the rock needed for those kinds of projects, as well as speccing out something like that water bar. Oftentimes these rock infiltrations might be used under a rooftop like this, where it's a French drain system that goes a few feet into the ground and allows that water to drip off the roof and get into the ground quickly instead of finding its way downslope and into the lake. Here's an example of, all right, we have a hard top driveway that's obviously moving sediment around and dirty water. Well, instead of it shooting down to the lake, now we can intercept it into this rock infiltration area along our driveway. And you can see this dirt might build up over time in the 10-year life of the project, such that, you know, at year 5 or 6, we might have to pull that rock out, spray it with a hose to get the dirt out, and then put it back in so that the system can continue to do the infiltration job. Here's the aforementioned rain garden tool. So what's cool about rain gardens is we get water infiltration off something like a parking lot or a downspout coming from a house. But at the same time, we use native plants in the rain garden to help support wildlife and some birds and migratory animals too. And you can see we plant them with sedges, forbs, and other plants with deep root structures. And they can tolerate the inundation for 12 to 24 hours of the rain garden while that water gets into the ground. Here's a freshly installed rain garden. So you see the berm on the edge, and then the water is being delivered downslope here, and then a safety outlet on the backside. There's a link at the bottom here to a rain garden webinar if you're interested. On the Healthy Lakes and Rivers website, you'll see the 2 rain garden guides that are the technical manual to help walk you through as how to install these. It was mentioned earlier, we encourage folks to, you can just take the materials off the Healthy Lakes and Rivers website and just utilize them in a do-it-yourself type fashion without utilizing the grants too, if that's the way you want to approach your stewardship on your lakeshore. So please do that if that is the way you want to go. Here's just 2 other webinars. One is a little more webinar on working with the counties like you'll be doing and what that rhythm looks like. This CLMN webinar linked here just goes into my colleague Paul talks about installing his own rain garden and what went into that process. And the second half of the webinar, I go a little deeper into native plantings if you want to check that out. Here's what another rain garden looks like. This is our Healthy Lakes and Rivers team talking with Carol about her putting her hemlock and her rain garden system in here. And she's just giving us a little update on how she went about it. And we'd love to go as a Healthy Lakes and Rivers team to check out about 5% of our projects, just to answer questions and to refine the program as we move forward. It was mentioned maybe next year as you grow into this and working with the county that perhaps you come back and look for other best practice support. Maybe it's doing additional shoreline restoration contests or just other work, but we encourage you to keep utilizing the Healthy Lakes and River grant money to help you with your goals for the 3 Lakes waterfront. To date, Healthy Lakes and Rivers has funded over hundreds of practices. I think we're over 900 practices. You see the list here. Native plantings is the most popular, fish sticks second, rain gardens, and we're gaining momentum with the diversion and rock infiltrations as people get the understanding of how to utilize those infiltration practices on the landscape. Pretty good coverage around the state, and I'm excited to see another little red dot going up in this part of the world in Oneida County. Here is the Healthy Lakes and Rivers website. It's a standalone website where you can find the fact sheets here, the technical documents, and and other resources to help you. There's a fact sheet on the frequently asked questions and other information on the grant, as well as resources to help you with successful projects. So check out the Healthy Lakes and Rivers website for more information. Really, it comes down to families and communities like your Three Lakes Waterfront Association coming together to do good things for lakes and rivers, and thinking through what step can I take as a family and as a shoreline property owner to maybe enter something like the shoreline restoration contest to do good things for the lake. I go back to this healthy shore list. There's other simpler activities that you can also think about as you move forward with thinking about stewardship for your shoreline property. With that, I think Michelle and Barbell have provided you with my email along the way. Otherwise, I'll throw it in the chat right now. I'm just super excited to see your momentum as a community moving forward with shoreline work, and I look to try and support you in any way I can as you endeavor moving forward. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Pat. That was a very detailed overview, and I think Michelle will be feeding us our questions here.
Nothing yet on the chat bar, just was checking it here just to see where we're at. And as I said, sometimes I know it's a little bit hard to get your question into the chat box. A little bit different than just raising your hand and being called upon. So thank you, Pat, for a great presentation.
Well, kudos to you guys for the work you're doing and for the partnership you're building here. It's very exciting to see, and I think it's going to bode well for the healthier waters moving forward.
I'd like to say something. I guess sort of in conclusion, I'd like to thank the presenters, Barbell, Michelle, and Pat on their excellent presentations. And just a word about the program. The Three Lakes Waterfront Association has decided to put some money into the game here to kind of get things started, which is why we're offering the contest with the prize money awarded to those applicants who need the restoration. It has the most significant need for the restoration. So just to cap things off, the monies that would be available to a possible contestant would be the prize monies awarded from the Waterfront Association for first, second, and third prizes. Then there is the county cost share monies available also up to a cap of $8,000. And then there is the Healthy Lakes and Rivers Initiative grants of the 5 best practices. Each of those grants would have an award of $1,000. So there is a potential of a significant amount of money for a big restorative project. And this is our way of trying to get our members involved in shoreline restorations, and we're hoping for success. So Cece, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think you covered it pretty well, Fred. At first, it seems a little confusing with the various layers and processes and steps, but just know that we'll be working with anybody all along the way to try to make it work for everybody clearly. So we're all on the same page on that one.
One thing that I forgot to mention is, of course, if you choose not to go into the contest or you don't get picked as an award recipient in the contest, this by no means stifles your opportunity to do shoreline restoration, because the grants and the county cost share is always available to applicants, not necessarily through the program. We're trying to do the contest as a stimulant to participation, but you can participate outside of the contest or even outside of the grants or cost shares. You can do your own funding. So there's many options available.
I also think it's important to get some publicity about this. So tell all your friends and neighbors along the lakeshore about what you've heard today. And if this isn't something that might be up your alley, it might be up your neighbor's alley. So pass the word around and encourage people to talk about it and come back to us with their questions.
Yep, well said, both Cece and Fred. And I just want to reiterate the fact that we've all come together with funding sources, but that does not mean that you have to take advantage, or if you feel uncomfortable with going through the county cost share dollars and it's just the funding that you want to tap into from the Waterfront Association, that's perfectly fine. And we are here to help outside of the contest or those lakes that aren't qualifying for that monies through the contest. So the cost share dollars and Healthy Lakes dollars do exist. So there's a lot of combinations, as CC mentioned. So as I always say to my group, and don't be shy, reach out. We're happy to talk things out and see what works for everyone.
Yeah, it seems like we're really getting to the end of our program. I want to point out that if questions go unanswered, you can always email us or call. And I don't know if there's any parting words that we need to address right now.
I guess just one parting word, you can get the contest application or description of the contest on the Three Lakes Waterfront Association website, which is tlwa.org. There'll also be hard copy applications in the Chamber of Commerce and the Edward Demmer Memorial Library in Three Lakes. So there are many ways that you can get the application forms. And there's lots of information on our website aside from the contest. There's our newsletters, which come out twice a year, information about the organization itself. And it's just, we like it a lot. It's just a beautiful website.
You're muted, Bear Bell.
Oh, well, then it looks like we have a really strong base to go on. I'm not sure where else to go. I think this, if anybody wants to look at the recording or wants to recommend the recording, anybody, it'll be likely posted on the Three Lakes Waterfront Association within the week, and hopefully on the Oneida County Land and Water Conservation Department side as well. With that, I think it's time to go into the weekend.
Thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you all for coming, especially your Saturday morning.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to our presenters also. Okay. Adios.
All right. Bye, everyone. It's been fun.